Greetings. I'm Ted Kroll, and I have the pleasure to introduce Anatomy of a Murder, which is a movie by Otto Preminger, 1959, based on a best-selling novel by Robert Traber, who is the pen name of a judge, a Michigan judge, John D. Volker. And for us who live in Michigan, this is a movie that takes place up in the UP. The story is based on an actual crime that occurred in 1952, and the author, Travers, actually did this trial, and is very much like what is in the film. And not only that, but the film itself, the picture itself, was filmed up in the UP on all locations. None of it was shot in Hollywood, which makes it very different from Hollywood pictures of that time. Of course, part of the great success of this film is because it has James Stewart in the role, playing kind of the folksy character that goes back to his Mr. Smith that goes to Washington days. And here you see him smoking a cigar, and here he is in his coat, which is a little too small for him. One of the other stars of the movie is Lee Remick, an actress not very well known today. Talk about her later. Ben Gazzara is a method actor who got his start here. Arthur O'Connell was a character actor that you see popping up here and there. Eve Arden was known as R. Mix Brooks. She's known to us that grew up in the 50s. And the prim-looking lady here is Catherine Grant. And the big surprise was George C. Scott. He didn't even make the initial credits, the main credits, and this was his real breakout film. He got an Academy Award nomination for this. Another important character in the film is the judge, played by Joseph Welch. Welch was a lawyer and never had been in a film before or since, but he was an impersonality from the 1950s because he appeared in the McCarthy hearings and was the fellow who told off McCartney and to his face saying, "Sir, have you no decency?" At any rate, his role in this film adds an offhanded and warm feeling that adds to the unpretentious characterization of the movie as a whole. As I mentioned before, the entire production was filmed in the UP itself, completely away from Hollywood, but the location was never glamorized. It was just shown in the way it was, being in a working mining area. Here is the one shot of the town itself. So the UP is not seen as anything all that exciting place to be. Here they are in the Marquette Courthouse and shooting the film on site. The lawyer's office, James Stewart office, is actually the house of the Travers. Travers actually lived. The author actually lived. And here is a scene in a bar. Nothing's added, nothing changed. And here is the most glamorous location shot of the beautiful UP. I want to point out a little offhanded scene that just pops in there. And this is the one place where you get a sense of the mining area and the kind of work that's done in the UP. But also it's this incredible little scene where they are talking about things, but they're also hassling over hard-boiled eggs. It's just a gem of a little scene, and I keep an eye for it. Now, while I talk there's realism in this film, I seriously doubt if members of the Duke Ellington band would be playing in a local club. But there is a scene where Ellington himself appears as the bandist called Pie-Eyed. Another thing about this film that makes it unique is that Duke Ellington wrote the score for it. While it's a really cool and jazzy score, it is a little too sophisticated for the northern Michigan milieu, but still it adds a lot of tension and glamour to the whole movie. Here's another realistic touch. Notice the stenographer in the front. You really don't notice him because all the action's going behind, but there he is adding something of the flavor. The same way with the jury doesn't appear. The individuals aren't, they just are part of the scenery. There are many reasons why this is a successful film, but one of the things I would like to point out is the way that Preminger presents his characters. He doesn't judge them. He shows them as being very complex characters that are neither good or bad, and he doesn't emphasize one over the other. You are allowed to make up your own decisions about their behavior and the way they are, what they are. I mean, this movie's very open ended. Here is Lee Remick through the film. Here she is supposedly been raped, and she comes across as very seductive towards James Stewart. It seems that this is her manner of getting along in the world, especially with men. So here are these scenes where she's just showing herself off. And Stewart doesn't buy it, but he's certainly taken by it. Shortly after this scene here, she is shown despondent and lonely, and this seems to be more of her real character. Here she is in the courtroom, supposed to be prim and proper, and when she's asked to take off her hat, she waves her hair in the air proudly. It's a great scene, and here she is seeing scared as she's being cross-examined by George C. Scott, and finally she's back to her old normal sexy self, showing off a girdle. My final comment is that I see this movie as a dark comedy. Here's a scene where it's out of nowhere the dog does a little trick and plays jumps on George C. Scott to the lap. So that's apropos of really nothing in the film. The film is not really anatomy of a murder. The fellow who gets murdered, you don't pay much attention to him. We don't even know who he is, and nobody really seems to be cared. It's more about the process of the trial and the people involved. And there's a lot of amusement and playfulness in the whole movie. Finally, I'd like to say, here is the last image of the film. And I don't know what it means other than he's showing a garbage can. Well, thanks for listening, and go and enjoy the film, and I will talk to you next week.